Good day, forum friends. Today's conversation will be with noted EdTech expert Phil Hill. Phil, welcome to the Presence Forum podcast. Thanks for making time to join us today.
I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Hey, when we're talking about the future of distance education and online learning, we're looking for experts in that field. You are, by definition, an expert in educational technology. So it made sense for us to dial you into this conversation and get it going. So with that, I'm going to start us out with a broad question. What's the most significant technological advancement that you believe will reshape online learning in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, it's hard to not answer that with generative AI. I mean, because quite honestly, it's by far the most interesting technology. But I'd put it in the context of the Achilles heel of distance education is student engagement, students feeling connected with each other, with a student, because there's so much need for asynchronous modalities to allow anywhere, anytime access. But the thing that suffers or is the most challenging to solve is student engagement.
Right.
So it's specifically looking at generative AI in two regards. One is directly on engagement. I think there's a real opportunity to use that to make students feel connected with each other, even if it's asynchronous.
Right.
And it could be back and forth with something that appear. I don't know if it's going to be avatar or just using AI to enable different time frames, but something to apply to the student engagement. But the second one I would say is I'm seeing a lot on the translation and the ability to do natural language translation, both with audio and video, which really opens up a lot of access possibilities for distance education to more directly access different student populations.
Yeah, that's a great call out. I don't know if we've had that conversation with other guests before, but the idea here is like opening English language learning to the entire population of the world, or at least major languages of the world that you could do in real
Yeah,
time.
and it's not just teaching about language, it's even taking the same learning content that may be about anything, but enabling an institution, for example, to reach a broader student population in a natural way. And I should explain a little bit. We've obviously had closed caption type
Right.
translations, stuff like that. But the thing that you have to note is, first of all, it forces you to read down at the bottom. It's You're not getting the same tone of the person speaking, etc. And so what you're getting now, and I really saw the first great example of this at ASU GSV, is the ability to mimic the speaker's tone and pacing and translation, so that it looks like, for example, I'm speaking in French or Spanish when
Right.
I'm not.
Right.
And then this week, added to that, Google at the Google I/O event, they introduced something within Google Meet to do the audio portion of this in real time. So you could actually have a synchronous session in multiple languages and overcome that language barrier. So I just think
Amazing.
there's a real access opportunity here that's opening up with these new tools.
Right, right. Well, the first issue that you mentioned, kind of the student engagement, the asynchronous nature
Yes.
of technology development right now. Tell me about, we've all talked about regular and substantive interaction, and what does that mean when it comes to generative AI? What does it mean when it comes to the future of technology in education? Do you see a path forward with regular and substantive? If yes, what does that look like?
Well, we don't know the answer is the challenge because, I mean, there was an update on regular and substantive interaction in 2019 on the regulatory side. So you could argue that's pretty good for policy to get up to 6 years old.
Yeah.
Um, and it hasn't dealt with the possibilities that we have here. So in the near term, I think it will be a barrier. It'll make it more difficult to address this engagement opportunities, and you'll have to slow down because of regulatory issues. But over time, I do think it'll catch up. So the biggest open question is if somebody tries to if replace and use an avatar as the main, interaction point for a student, and you're using it that pretty clearly is going to have a problem until we redefine the regulations
Right.
again. But I think there's a lot of opportunity even beyond there because you could just inject it in what nominally would be a homework or a lab, but it can be a more interactive homework or lab now. And it's not replacing interacting with
Yeah.
faculty or a
Right.
teaching assistant. So I think it fits in, but there will be some barriers, particularly in the near term. But long term, I'm bullish, but short term, there will be some challenges.
There'll be some challenges for sure. And I like your point. 6 year lag is like, well, it's pretty
That's pretty good.
significantly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're narrowing the gap a little bit
Yes.
on that lag. Well, but it brings up another question that probably deserves a little bit of our attention, and that is, what is the role of faculty, moving forward? What does technology do to the traditional faculty role? Will that become unnecessary, or is there always room for, or must there always be a human that is, directing learning?
Well, if you look at the problem I'm describing, it's students feeling like they belong as part of a class, that engagement. And from that regard and from the course design, I just think there's always going to be a role for a human. But where the mistake comes in is trying to apply the same role. And the classic example is still trying to think about lectures is the way for an instructor to be involved. So I do think that it's not removing the need for a human in the loop, but I do think it's going to accelerate the changing of the role of what they play. And I'll
Yeah.
mention one other non AI technology, and that's just simple what we're doing right now: synchronous video discussions and the ability to record them. There were a lot of criticisms of Zoom University during COVID, but one of the good things that happened is it's just now so easy. And that is an additional tool that you can use for engagement and for instructors to be directly involved in that, even within an asynchronous course.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I still believe that the humans in the loop have a very big role. It's just not the same role.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to determine, how different of a role that looks like, because you could see in a world where you have generative AI and personalization in not only language but in learning styles and in just effective teaching, when that can happen at such scale that a human could never, pull that off. It'll be interesting. That'll be challenging to our traditional notion of a human instructor. I
Sure.
mean,
And it's interesting you mentioned scale because a lot of the technology possibilities around distance education is to enable scale. But that doesn't mean a human is losing all connections. It can actually increase connections. So I think a lot of technology can be the eyes and ears of an instructor um, for a larger class and actually have greater interactions in seeing what their students are doing and giving quick feedback. So I think there's a lot of scale possibilities by that whole metaphor of becoming the eyes and ears of an instructor.
right? Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to finish with one last question. Let's talk about this topic. About a month ago, I think late April, the White House issued another executive order on artificial intelligence. This was artificial intelligence in education, and many of our listeners will be familiar with this, but we're going to focus on this at the President's Forum in the month of June. We're talking about, what does this mean? Where is the administration on AI in education? Are they doing the right thing? If not, what should they be doing? Anyway, I just wanted your thoughts on that executive order. What do you think about it?
Well, first of all, I think it's less important than rescinding the Biden administration's executive order on AI in general, where there was a very heavy handed attempt to mimic a lot of what's happening in Europe and try to regulate AI on a fairly detailed level before we even know what it can do and what it should do. I mean, I just look at the possibilities now are different than they were from 2 years ago. So the most important thing was actually rescinding that previous executive order that would have hamstrung our efforts in education to see what AI can do. The new executive order encourages it, but the risk they have is you don't want to replace heavy handed regulation with heavy handed promotion. So it's good to encourage the usage of AI to improve education and see what it can do. And I think there's some good elements in the new executive order, but the risk that is we don't want to get into actively promoting it from a top-down level. I think it should be much more framed in let's encourage usage and encourage both top-down and bottoms-up.
Right.
So I'm positive in the direction it's going, but there are risks involved with the new executive order.
Yeah, I like your position on this, which, if I'm going to summarize that, it is, hey, the future of higher education, and education generally, it revolves around technology in some degree. But you're just saying you don't need to you don't need to dictate what that looks like with a government order. You just
Yes.
need to be flexible enough to follow the technology, and where it works, and where it doesn't, it doesn't.
Yeah, and provide enough guardrails just to keep things going roughly in the right direction. And when you identify potential abuse, be able to deal with it. So a light touch, then it should be encouraging innovation as opposed to dictating innovation.
Right, right. Well, Phil, we appreciate your insight on this topic. We appreciate your expertise and what you bring to it, and we will look forward to future episodes where we can bring you on to talk through, especially issues of education technology with our listeners. So, thank you for joining.
Oh, well, thank you. I enjoyed this.